Let's get started. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Our first in-person forum since COVID started. So this is really exciting. I'm Nancy Comfrey. I'm the chair of the Voter Service Committee, the League of Women Voters, Concord-Carlisle. And we will be conducting this in 3 ways today. We are obviously here in person at the Townhouse. We are also live streaming this on TV, cable TV channel 9. And we're also, as you see, on Zoom, and it will be recorded on Zoom for later viewing from the League of Women Voters website. It's being recorded on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Concord-Carlisle, which is the producer and owner of its content. When aired, posted, or otherwise distributed, this recording will be available in its entirety, with the exception that excerpts may be provided by League of Women Voters to news media reporting on the event. No part of this recording may be used in political campaign advertising. Let me first give you an overview of what we'll be doing. We'll start with introductions from each of the candidates who will tell us why they're running for elected office and what qualifications they bring for that role. It will be followed by a set of questions prepared by the League of Women Voters, and each candidate has 60 seconds to respond to those. We'll then give about equal time during the forum for participant questions, for audience questions. And those can come in 2 ways. Either they get entered into the chat on Zoom, or there are white cards in the back if you don't already have one in your hand with little pencils. And if you, as you are listening, think of a question, when we get to the audience question part, you can hold those up and someone will come and get those and bring them to our very capable question collators team over here on the side. And finally, we'll give each candidate 30 seconds for a closing statement. So since all of these seats are uncontested, this is a forum, not a debate. And in that spirit, we will be doing not a rebuttal, but in an effort to make this a little bit more of an exchange, we will allow any candidate to raise their hand after another candidate has responded to a question and either point something out that was missed or perhaps ask another question about it. We're trying to get a little bit more flexibility into it, so it's not just the format of question, answer. We'll see how that goes. In order to help us, though, keep on time, because we do actually have a lot of questions for our candidates, we'll be using the Zoom timer, which is up there. And the candidates can see it because it's on the back screen as well. And you see an example of it here, and I think I'm going to run out in a minute and 25 seconds. Okay. So with that, I think we can begin with our opening statements from our candidates. Carmen Reese is I'm going to just take these in order. Later, I'm going to be mixing it up a little bit more, but let's just take this in order of seating. Carmen Reese is running for the position of town moderator.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much to the League for organizing this event and all the other things that you do to support local government. I'm running for moderator, and I was just counting, I was first elected in 2016, so I think this is my 7th one-year term that I am running for as moderator. Prior to that, I served as a selectman for 2 terms, and prior to that, I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I started my volunteer career in Concord when my kids were in public school, and I was a regular volunteer in the public schools. I'm running for 2 reasons. The first is that I really love town meeting. I'm a big fan. It is a rare form of government nationwide. It is our opportunity for local government through direct deliberative democracy. And secondly, this community has given so much to me and to my family. I'm just delighted to be able to give back. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carmen. Terry Ackerman is running for Select Board.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Nancy, and the whole League for organizing and hosting this candidate forum today. And thanks to everybody who's here, taking the time out of your day to attend. And I just want to take a minute to say how great it is that we can all be together live again or watching by Zoom, and we have these choices This is, getting together is something we used to take for granted. And let's not take our great town of Concord for granted. Please remember to come out and vote on April 12th. All of these people up here with me are willing to serve this town, and they deserve your vote. So 3 years ago, I ran for select board because I really wanted to combine my love of Concord with my collaborative style and my enthusiasm and my hard work. I do have a master's in public administration from the Kennedy School at Harvard, and I've lived here for 21 years, served as the FinCom person for 6 years, 2 years on the Community Preservation Committee. And I don't pretend to have all the answers. No one does. We all really need to work together. So vote for all of us. Thank you. April 12th.
Thank you, Terry. Mary Hartman is also running for select board.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming out and showing your commitment to local democracy. I'm glad to see you all here and the people on Zoom. I've been in Concord now 12 years. I've been 5 years on the Finance Committee, which gave me a really thorough understanding of what the issues are facing the town today. Before that, I had experience that I think is relevant to the job of Select Board. I was the president of the Concord Green Condominium Association, and we went through quite a bit of turmoil while I was the president. We lost our staff. We had a lot of the residents were unhappy. We had put off some capital plans. So I, together with the board, was able to turn that around and get a whole new management team, put together initiate some capital improvements that we needed to be made. And I feel like that was a really good experience for me to understand how to listen to people, how to get things done in a way that's financially prudent. So I want to be on the select board because I want to have a voice in the conversations that we're having today. So I'm just glad to be here and listening and learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Alexa Anderson is also running for school committee, not on select board.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexa Anderson. Thank you guys so much for hosting this debate, or forum. Anyone who knows me knows I am a monstrous fan of civic engagement. So I really, really authentically appreciate this. I always talk about how I wish more people in my demographic would be a little bit more civically active. So this is a commitment that I take pretty seriously. When I'm running, because when my kids became school-aged, I was very active in all of the different PTGs at the schools that they attended. And in 2018, I joined the Superintendent Long Range Planning Committee, which was comprised of so many various stakeholders, students, parents, teachers, educators, community folks. And together, this sort of long-range vision was put forth about what we wanted to do, or what the district wanted to do in the schools over the next 5 years. And I felt that the work was really meaningful. I felt that the vision was something I genuinely wanted to champion. And then it was over. And I felt that running for school committee was the best way that I could participate and ensure that that vision continued and was seen to fruition. So I'm very pleased to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Alexa. Cynthia Rainey is also running for school committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the League for hosting us this afternoon. It will be a privilege to serve you for a second term. There's definitely a steep learning curve in all of these elected positions. I have so much more to learn. The school committee is definitely the right job for a lifelong learner. I moved to Concord in 1998, 2 sons who went through the Concord Public Schools. I served 6 years on the Board of Assessors and served as president of the League of Women Voters. Part of our work is securing strong relationships for the long term and maintaining the school's credibility with committees and constituents. This trust can only come from trust and understanding that requires due diligence on the part of committee members so that we can best advocate for the schools. I look forward to serving you in a second term. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cynthia. Stephanie Kroback is running for Housing Authority.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much for hosting today. As I listen to everybody here, I realize I'm the newcomer to volunteering or being on an elected board on the panel. I am a 6-year Concord resident by way of Arlington. I lived in Arlington for 30 years. I was actually raised in Michigan in terms of college and where we sort of eventually landed as a family. My father was in the Air Force, career military. My mother was a nurse, and I think both of those professions really proved to us as a household that service was a key value of ours. I have a degree from the University of Michigan in public health. I dedicated my career to health, both overseas in third world countries and also then back here 36 years ago in Massachusetts, where I've been working for hospital systems and the state of Massachusetts, private industry. I helped build the Connector, which is our marketplace for folks who don't have insurance. As I said, so when I moved to Concord, I had the wonderful ability to also be a part-time worker, and the other part of my life was to give back then and volunteer. So through what I do, I mean, my value, my philosophy is that housing is a key determinant of someone's health status.
Thank you, Stephanie.
So, oh, I'm sorry. I ran out of time.
This is my first practice in using
Yeah, it's my
the
first one
timer.
too. Thank you.
All right, let's move to the prepared questions. I will go between questions that I expect all panelists or all candidates to answer, and then some specific to the roles that you're running for. But we start with a general question for all candidates, and that is, what do you consider the most important priorities for you in your elected role in the coming year? And what needs to be done to address those priorities? So we'll start with Mary Hartman.
Thank you. Okay, I've thought about this. My 3 priorities going forward would be, first, to make sure that we continue to have a welcoming community to people of diverse means and backgrounds, so that people feel that they can come, they can live here, and that they can afford to stay here. My second priority would be to be a welcoming place for our town employees. As you know, we're suffering some churn right now within our town government, and I would like to make Concord to be a place that most people want to come and work. And then finally, my other priority would be to make it a welcoming place for businesses. I think we also saw during the pandemic that our downtown villages are vulnerable right now, and that they're important to town character, and they also bring a lot as far as revenues to the town, so they're important to us. And also we have some commercial spaces within Concord, I think, that could be doing more to be an economic engine. So those are my priorities. What would I do?
And
Do I have time?
you're
Am I
out
up?
of your time. Thank you very much. Good priorities. Terry.
Thank you. I agree with Mary, and I have a similar platform that I call ABC, Affordable Balanced Community. And that is talking about affordable housing as well as the affordability in terms of tax bills for all of the rest of us. Balance between all the different desires and needs that we have, such as greening everything, affordable housing, schools, fiscal sustainability, all of it, how to get that balance. And community is the character of this town, which includes historic spaces, open spaces, and civility in town. And one of the big things we have to do this year is decide on the town manager, who I looked it up from last time. We want a collaborator, consensus builder, strong work ethic, strategic and innovative management. I have a long list here.
Thank you.
And we're going to be looking at that carefully.
Thank you very much, Terry. And Carmen, same question.
So for the moderator, I'd see a short-term and a long-term challenge. And the short term is to continue figuring out how to deal with the pandemic in terms of our town meeting process in a way that makes every voter feel comfortable coming and participating in town meeting. But the longer-term challenge, I think, for the moderator is to figure out how to increase civic engagement and increase participation in town meetings so that it remains a viable and meaningful and a form of government that truly represents our community. You'll see very soon some big banners going up across Main Street in Concord Center and also in West Concord, and that's one of the steps we're taking to try to increase participation.
Thank you. Alexa?
Sure. In schools, I see our top 3 challenges are all things that have either been grown from the pandemic or exacerbated by the pandemic. Unfortunately, I think we all have to confront this idea that learning loss with our students is sadly kind of real. So we do need to close these gaps in our student achievement, and I think we need to do it quickly. Secondly, mental health is becoming acute with students. This is stuff that, unless you were in it, really seeing it with your friends and your peers and their families, you wouldn't even believe it. And then thirdly, I think the pandemic has really degraded so many ways how we communicate with each other and collaborate and talk to each other and look at each other face to face as a community. So those 3 things, I think, are chief among what we'll be looking at in the next year.
Great, thank you. Cynthia?
So I agree with my colleague, mental health, and I'm going to call it deferred learning would be a top priority. Belonging for all of our Boston, Concord, and Carlisle families. I feel like that's a very important thing that we need to work on. And also sustainability, environmental, fiscal, and educational.
Thank you. Stephanie?
My 3 priorities, specifically related to housing, but I think these are also translatable. The first is funding. I see the cost of care and feeding our housing units going up tremendously. The number of residents who are in need of housing is also increasing. So we need dollars to be able to build new units, certainly, in collaboration with other entities in the town. The second thing is advocacy, making sure that when we make decisions, that those decisions also include the impact, both good and bad, to the residents in the housing authority. And then the third is quality, making sure that what we have in terms of the housing units we provide to our most vulnerable citizens are safe and they're proud to be there.
Thank you, Stephanie. Our next question is going to be for the 2 candidates for Select Board. We'll start with Terry. Can you give us an example of an important trade-off we're going to have to consider in the coming year's budget and where you stand on this trade-off?
Okay, there are quite a few of them. You said an important trade-off?
An important trade-off that's endemic in the budget, built into the budget.
Okay, geez, there's so many, I don't know what to pick. Well, I guess one trade-off is between operating and capital costs, because, we have a fixed pie, and we want to build a great middle school, but we also want to keep operations as high service level as we can, and so with the limited tax revenues that we have, how are we going to do all the capital projects and all the operation projects that we need to do? That's a very general answer, but.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe something will come back on that.
Okay.
Mary?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, can you give us an example of an important trade-off we're going to have to make in the coming year's budget and where you stand on the trade-off?
I think the trade-off that we have to make in the coming years is the trade-off we've been living with for decades now, which is the trade-off between funding for the town and funding for the schools. And I think that for the past couple of years, I know because I've been on the Finance Committee, that the town has not really gotten all the funding that they need. The people that work for the town haven't gotten raises, or they've gotten very small raises. Some of the capital projects that we're trying to get done for the town have been delayed. Might notice the roads. So I think that there's this continual tension, which is healthy, between the schools and the town. And right now, I think it's time for the town to kind of pull ahead a little bit and get some funding.
Thank you. The next question is for the town moderator, Carmen. Can you help us understand the role between the town moderator and the Finance Committee, and specifically how you pick members of FinCom?
Sure. The Finance Committee is really the eyes and the ears of the general public, the community, on fiscal issues. And just what Mary just mentioned, the Finance Committee is paying attention to things like the trade-off between the town and the schools in terms of where our tax dollars are going. In terms of appointments to the Finance Committee, we look for balance. So we look for representation through all of our precincts in town. We look for men and for women. We look for parents of school-age children and also older people. We look for a mix of backgrounds, people who are comfortable with numbers and have finance backgrounds, maybe CPAs, maybe finance people, but also ordinary people who bring the simple questions that are so important to all of us.
Thank you, Carmen.
And by the way, I'm looking for volunteers.
A plug. Next question is for the school committee, and Cynthia, we'll start with you. To our knowledge, there's still a substantial gap between the FinCom and school committee's school budget. Can you tell us how and on what issues in particular you're advocating for the school's committee's budget?
Well, as Mary pointed out, and people know, we're kind of at an impasse. And from my perspective, I don't think it's fair for voters to have to pick a town meeting. And I think it is our responsibility as leaders in the community to work through the gap in some way, shape, or form, so that the town meeting is confident that we've done everything that we can do. Thank you.
Okay, same question for you, Alexa.
Can you repeat it one more time?
Sure. There's still a substantial gap between FinCom and school committee's school budget. And can you tell us how and on what issues in particular you've advocated for the school committee's budget?
Sure. So right now we have, I think it's about a $300,000 gap between the recommendation of the Finance Committee and the recommendation of the superintendent. And what has been challenging for all of us, I think, is the fact that the towns and, everybody's been in crisis for a few years. So we are starting to look and will continue to look for any further efficiencies, and we'll continue to work with them together. I think we're all meeting this week coming up, and hopefully we'll yield some results. I think it's encouraging that we're willing to talk to each other and collaborate, and hopefully, like with everything else, collaboration and communication is maybe the pathway forward.
Thanks, Lexa. Stephanie, Housing Authority question. What do you think the most important service to the town is in serving on the Housing Authority?
Most important service to the town. I think it really relates to the topics I brought up earlier. I mean, part of it is my service to the town, if we think of it that way, is really one of advocacy, particularly for a town like Concord. I think we are geographically spread out a bit in terms of just our conservation land and our needs to sort of drive places. And I think that there's also a sense that perhaps the Housing Authority units are over there. And so what I think we need to do, what my job can be, is to also, as I said before, make sure that they have the right advocate, and to make sure that when we're talking about funding and FinCom, that we also know If there are town dollars available or could be available, how do we lobby for those?
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. This is a question for everybody, and we'll start with Carmen. The town has been working to address questions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. How would you each like to substantively address this focus in your area?
So the only area in which I really can address it is in appointments to the Finance Committee. And I have looked for volunteers, and I have recruited, and I have beat the bushes for folks of all descriptions in town to try and maintain the diversity on the Finance Committee.
Okay, thank you. Mary?
I think the best way to bring diversity to Concord is through housing. And housing, in order to get more affordable housing, it starts with money, and the town has been pretty good at as far as allocating money every year at the annual town meeting. We're hoping to get better funds, more reliable funds to fund affordable housing, but we need more than just money. We also need, when a piece of land becomes available, we need to optimize that piece of land to get as much affordable housing as we possibly can. We need to understand that some of the areas within town that are most conducive to housing, whether it be multifamily or whatever, should be used as, we should try to get as much affordable housing as we can from the places we have available, because land in Concord is so hard to come by. So it would be diversity through housing, money, and the optimal use of the land that we have available.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Repeat the question.
The town has been working to address questions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. How would each of you like to substantively address this focus in your area?
So certainly housing is an important factor in terms of diversity and inclusion, and what I would consider historically underserved populations. I think the trick there, though, the challenge, it's not just housing that matters for folks, and we know that, everybody knows that. It matters about schools, it matters about the churches, the kinds of food you can get near you. And if a community doesn't have people who look like you or people who worship like you, it's a tough, or if you need a car, it's a tough place to live. So I think what we should do is really consider what also are our more holistic services that are a part of this town. And as I mentioned, what jobs are here? How can I get to the doctor? How can I get to the subway? How can I get to church?
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Cynthia?
Yes, thank you. The Concord Public Schools, the Concord-Carlisle Public Schools have created a DEI subcommittee. Last year, we invested in and hired a DEI director. We're currently working on multicultural texts and curricula. We are working on diversity and hiring of our staff. And on Tuesday, we'll be going through multicultural texts. Also, the policy subcommittee is working on having a MECO non-voting member on the school committee. So those are just a few of, there's quite a bit of work, and those are just a few of the pieces of work that are currently going on.
Thank you, Cynthia. Alexa?
Sure. As Cynthia mentioned, we were both on the committee last year when we decided to make the investment in a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the district. I think that was the first step. And what has been encouraging to see is that in his first 6 or so months, he has met with all kinds of diverse stakeholders, parents, students, our own educators, to draft a strategic plan for what he sees will be the necessary first initiatives in our district. So certainly I will champion that and give him and his team the support he needs. And then secondly, one thing that we've done this year that's new to ensure that we hear from all of our constituents, we've started to do constituent coffees. We do them in Concord. We neglected this past fall to go to Carlisle, and we've done them in Boston as well. Metco Inc. has
You'll have a chance to
Anyway.
expand on this in just
Sure.
a minute, okay? Thank you. Terry?
Thank you. In the town, we've done several efforts this year. One is in the staffing. There's been a DEI consultant working with the staff. And then on the board level, the league was very helpful to the select board this year in helping us get moving, and we were able to set up a very active DEI committee. Also, we're looking at all the other boards and committees and trying to make it easier to volunteer. Sometimes the little things can make a big difference. Those things we used to call green cards. We had some people object because they were thinking about immigration and ICE, and we've changed it to volunteer cards. Just something little like that can make us a more welcoming community. So we've had a lot of success with more diversity in the people that apply to be on boards and committees.
Thank you, Terry. School committee question, I'm going to expand on what I just asked everybody in a little bit more depth, which is, what do you think the school committee can and should do to elevate the voices of Concord's Metco families and BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, to address the concerns expressed about lack of responsiveness and transparency on issues of racial discrimination and diversity, equity, and inclusion? And Alexa, could you start?
Cynthia began to touch on it, but the first and I think most powerful thing that we can do is vote quickly on a policy to add a non-voting parent member from the Metco community. We talk a lot in our discussions of diversity, equity, inclusion about the idea that representation matters. And I fully believe that. And I think that having a voice that isn't just a voice heard at a coffee, as we go around, but that is at the table in, the seat of power, I guess, if you will, is a really necessary first step. Additionally, the superintendent has put together an advisory council as well. And I think that, we'll have 2, liaisons to school committee there. And I think that will be an additional powerful tool. And those things in concert together, I hope will yield results quickly.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Alexa stole most of my thunder.
Yep.
We had a number of requests from the Metco families, which we really haven't had an opportunity yet to review as a committee. So I still think we have a lot of work to do. They requested data analysis and some other things for us to look at as a committee. So again, we really haven't discussed it yet. So I think we all agree there's a lot to be done. We'll be discussing at least the policy on Tuesday night about appointing a Metco non-voting member. So I encourage people to tune in, but I think there's much more to come on this topic.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. A question for Housing Authority. Stephanie, what are your views on the right emphasis we should place in the upcoming housing production plan between development of affordable rental housing versus owner-occupied housing?
Goodness. I'm not really sure. Ask the question again.
I'm going to
just
ask
wanna
it
make
again.
sure.
What do you think is the right emphasis for us to place in the upcoming housing production plan between development of affordable rental housing versus owner-occupied housing?
My personal opinion here, and let me just also preface this by saying I'm not quite familiar with the housing production plan in terms of the specific elements of it. I know what it is, and I know we have completed it for 2015, and our next round is now. In terms of the key differences between renter-based and owner-occupied, my personal opinion, owner-occupied is the way to go. To the extent we can offer affordable homes to folks who are in income brackets that are considered lower socioeconomic income brackets, the better off I think folks will be, certainly in the short term and longer term.
Okay, thank you. Select board question, starting with Mary. Both of you have sat also on the Finance Committee. And can you, how do you think your financial priorities can and should shift when sitting on the Select Board rather than on the Finance Committee?
Good question. The Finance Committee's role is to advise the Select Board. So we do the research, we try to prioritize and understand where we're spending versus operation versus, but our role is advisory. When you're on the Select Board, you have to make decisions. The role of the Select Board is to make decisions. And I think that I'll have to say that already starting to think about being on the Select Board, I'm kind of relaxing my emphasis on saving money all the time. So I think when you're on the Select Board, you kind of see things in a broader way, and you kind of get a better understanding for why we want to spend money in ways that when I'm on the Finance Committee, I might not understand as thoroughly.
Thank you. And Terry?
Very well said. Yes. I was very firmly embarked on the Finance Committee's mission and then had to make that shift. So, but it also relates to the previous question you asked. So I was thinking about how you have to take a global view. And looking at several articles in the warrant, we have a free cash issue that we don't want free cash to go too low and negatively affect our bond rating. And we have several articles this year. Article 7 is going to take $1 million out of free cash to help the tax rate. Article 20 is going to help with the stabilization fund for the middle school. And then there's Article 24 for affordable housing. How are we going to do all of this? Well, we can't. If we do, we will go below that 5% threshold. So you have to take that global view, but luckily we got rescued this year by ARPA, which I can talk about in another question.
Okay. And last, a question for the town moderator, Carmen. Do you think there are ways that our town meeting can or should be improved, and what are they?
Well, I think that broader and deeper participation in town meeting would be the chief way to improve it. And it's been pretty difficult to make any headway on that in the last 2 years, given the pandemic. But efforts that I've made include going to the PTG head meetings and talking with them about how to reach them. And with the death of our local newspaper, it's difficult to figure out what the right way to reach people is. So I think that reaching people more through social media, putting a banner up in the street, and going where the people are to promote their understanding and engagement in town meeting would be the thing to do.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, a question for everybody next, and you're gonna have to listen to this one carefully, okay?
Oh, gosh.
Many Concordians value the opportunity to participate in discussion of town issues as demonstrated by our public comment at committee meetings. Do you think our current approach to public comment strikes the right balance between engaging the community and managing committee meeting length and complexity? If not, how do you think we should change our approach to public comment? And we'll start with Stephanie. Sorry, Stephanie.
That's okay. That's okay. It's funny that you ask me that question, because that question was just asked of me by one of our housing residents. And so.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, let me say, part of the reason she asked me the question related to the way we on the Housing Authority Board structure public comment. And she wants us to take the view of a more dynamic, the ability to do it in a more dynamic way. And so I think that's essentially what my answer would be to here is there a way for the audience, the participants, the community to be able to, in a more dynamic way, get their questions answered. I actually think there must be ways for us to do far more outreach out than it is for them to tell us things in.
Okay, thank you. Alexa?
Sure. I was asked this recently at a candidate coffee as well, and I think what the challenge is, and anyone who attended one of our 45 school committee meetings last year that ranged in length from like 3 to 5 hours, know that one of our largest challenges is the idea that our meetings are in the public but not with the public. And I think that the way we structure our public comment is in fact to ensure that our meetings are both efficient and manageable. That being said, it's so bizarre and inhumane and like antithetical to how we should all be as humans, interacting with each other all the time. So I do think, again, one of the things that the school committee must do more and often is our community outreach via coffees, where we can have a dialogue back and forth with our constituents. We're committed to that, and you'll see them coming soon.
Thank you.
More.
Cynthia?
So Alexa's exactly right. It is very difficult to not be able to respond to public comments, but we have a friend of ours called the open meeting law, and if we took up an agenda, a comment that wasn't on our agenda, and began deliberating, we'd be breaking the law. So I think both boards, the select board and the school committee, have that challenge. Well, all committees actually. I think it's important that you recognize the comment and perhaps put it on a future agenda if it seems appropriate. But the coffees are also a great way to have a dialogue where we don't deliberate.
Okay, thank you. Terry?
I think Cynthia just made.
I'm sorry, I said Terry.
Oh, sorry.
They rhyme, so it's hard. Go ahead.
So this year, as chair of the select board, I've struggled with that because you hit the nail on the head, Nancy. The balance that you have to strike between having the engagement of the citizens and their ability to ask questions and have input, but you're also there to get some business done. And you can't be there so late that people are so tired that they're making bad decisions. So you have to run an efficient meeting. How do you do both? And that's something that the chair has to balance. We have our public comment period at the end, which not everyone likes, but if there's a particularly important or controversial issue, we try to take public comment during that issue as well. And hopefully that strikes the balance.
And Mary? Sorry.
Thanks. I agree with everything that's been said so far. I just want to make one comment. We have something called hearings, which is for the sole purpose of getting public input. And what I've noticed is the hearings have become tellings as opposed to hearings necessarily. So I went to a hearing recently. It was a hard stop 2-hour meeting, and the whole first hour was taken up with telling the audience as opposed to opening it up sooner and engendering a dialogue. So I think hearings should be that, hearings.
Okay, thank you. And Carmen?
So this is the perennial problem, is how to balance efficiency with public participation, because the public wishes to participate and work needs to be done. At town meeting, we have time limits, and the meeting has the ability to decide when it feels it has had enough discussion and is ready to make a decision.
Carmen, we're going to stick with you for a question for the town moderator. Can you explain how town meeting has changed over the course of your tenure and what drove that change?
How it has changed over the course of my tenure. We have a lot of traditions that are good traditions and are unique to our community. So I think that the ways in which it has remained the same are more palpable than the ways in which it has changed. We've done some experimentation with things like electronic voting, and I think there's real mixed feelings about that in our community, but it was certainly worth looking at. I think certainly during the pandemic, we made a more robust use of the consent calendar, and a lot of people really liked that. It's another question of balance.
Thank you. Stephanie, back to you with Housing Authority. Do you think that meeting the town's SHI, for State Housing Inventory, threshold of 10% for affordable housing will sufficiently address housing equality issues in Concord? Why or why not?
Well, the biggest reason why not is because our housing, our need is increasing. In addition to the number of folks who are aging into Medicare and who also are the higher proportion of our housing residents today, we also have a category of, we also have a population called disabled. And the definition of disabled is quite broad at a federal level, and the numbers of disabled is also increasing. A simple example of that we've all heard about is COVID long haulers. So we are going to have a higher incidence of need. Therefore, I think that 10% isn't going to meet that need.
Thank you. Okay, a question for the school committee. We'll start with Cynthia. There's been a lot of publicity about the mental health and skill gap challenges that students have experienced due to COVID and perhaps even before COVID. Can you give us an example of how, in your role on the school committee, you've addressed the well-being and educational progress of our students?
Yes, thank you. And I'm misremembering, there's a Stanford program that my colleague probably remember better than I, that we've been using. Challenge Success, thank you very much. Both at the middle, we started at the high school and then we moved on to the middle school. And I think it could have been like 17 or 18 that we began that work. I think we're sliding back into it as we are, hopefully leaving the pandemic a little bit behind. So it's very prescribed and has a good framework to do the work. It's resulted in things like reduced homework-free weekends, being sure that exams aren't scheduled simultaneously for one day, for example, or even other assessments. We also started school later and purchased 3 buses so that our high school students could get a little more sleep. So I think we have to go back and look at what the pandemic has also caused more mental stress, which we know it has.
Okay, Alexa?
Thank you.
Sure. 2 things that I see at the forefront of our work, both are indirect, but our district is searching for a new social emotional learning curriculum right now, and we aren't involved in the specificity of that work, but we will learn about it and ultimately be responsible for funding that curriculum. So ensuring that the curriculums we use in giving our kids the right tools to manage and cope with stress, whether it's academic, social, in school or out of school, I think is really necessary. And another thing, again, indirect work on our part, but even little pragmatic things. The district introduced a tool called Care Solace this year, which is simply a platform that's a software platform given to all people in the district that is just a platform that connects students with mental health care providers, because even simple things like that are kind of broken out there.
Thank you. All right, Select Board, starting with Terry. What would you say are the 3 most important characteristics of a town manager for Concord?
Oh, good. I started talking about that before and ran out of time. Okay. Well, I have quite a long list here. I don't know how to pick 3. I guess, collaborator and consensus builder is one of the big ones. Ability to hire and retain and inspire the staff is really important. Being an excellent communicator, Also, I'd have to add identifying and solving complex problems. There are so many talents and skills that the town manager needs. And that is one of the biggest jobs of the select board, is to hire the town manager and evaluate that person. So thank you for that question.
It was made for you. Mary?
I think the top three, the first would be integrity, and by that I mean that they do what they say they're going to do and they follow through. The second is, it's going to be overlap with Terry, I can see, is attracting and retaining competent people that are loyal and want to do the best work that they can do. And then also the ability to delegate so that they don't get overwhelmed, because it's a big job.
Great. Thank you very much. So this is the conclusion of our prepared questions, and we'll now move to questions from the audience. If you're on Zoom, you should be entering your questions into the chat box. And if you're in the room and you have a question that's written on a card, you can put your hand up. If you need a card, Carlin will come around and bring those to you. Please be specific about who you want to ask the question of. If I get a question that looks like it's for everybody, I will ask everybody, and we'll have our competent question collators over here feed me questions, or actually to ask the question through your mic, and then I will direct to the correct respondent if it's not obvious, or if there are two of you. Okay, so are you already ready with a question?
We are.
Okay, very good.
This
please,
is
go
a
ahead.
question that's available for everyone on the panel. What do you think are the two best uses for the Peabody School property and the 2229 Main Street Starmet property?
Okay, so big question. We'll start with Stephanie on that one.
Again, being a newcomer, I'm not quite sure exactly where those
Okay,
properties
so
are.
let's not
yeah.
start with you on this one, sorry. Let's start with Mary on this one.
Or Mary.
Poor Mary.
I'm sorry, the two uses for Peabody? Starmet. And then the next is Starmet. Okay, with Peabody, I think we could explore. This is what we would need to explore, would be looking at it for affordable housing would be the first thing. And then the second thing we would explore, I think, is selling that and using those proceeds to buy land somewhere else in town for affordable housing. Those are my out-of-the-box questions, answers for that. For Starmet, that's bigger. Starmet, as you know, is 46 acres. The town needs to understand that a large portion of that land is pristine. It has never been, it has no hazardous materials in it. So I think a big portion of that land could be used again for housing. I think we should also explore commercial development there. How much time do I have?
I think you've probably gone over your time. We didn't quite have the timer working as we started audience questions, sorry. But
I'm out of town.
That's good.
Okay.
That's good. Terry?
Well, I do agree with Mary that those are really great potential uses, but I think the way I would look at it when the right time comes is to have a public forum or a focused select board meeting where the public could weigh in, because I think we really need to think out of the box on these two. These are once-in-a-lifetime type opportunities, and it's very important to get a lot of input. So I personally have not made up my mind at all on these properties. Obviously, affordable housing, open space. These are, of course, wonderful uses that we need to look at. Also with the Starmet property.
Thanks.
Oops.
These are short. It's
Yeah.
gonna
Oh,
be
it's
hard.
30
Yeah, it's
seconds?
30
Oh, I'm
seconds
sorry.
now.
Okay.
I'm realizing how tough
Do we
that
get to
is.
add?
If you wanted to put your hand up and do the extra 30 seconds that we were doing before, I
Okay,
will
good, I'm
accept
taking
that.
it.
So 30 seconds more for Mary.
I really like what Terry just said, is this is not a decision that's going to be made by the select board all by themselves, and we really need to get a lot of public input as far as what's the best use for that land.
Okay, thank you. Terry?
Just real quick, what I was going to finish with was, we need to look also at the Starmet property before we buy it. We need to look really carefully at all the liabilities there. There are past liabilities that are probably covered. There are present liabilities, and I'm especially looking at the future potential liabilities. So before we get ahead of ourselves and buy it, we need to do our due diligence on it.
Excellent. Carmen? Do you-
With all due respect, I'm going to do demur because the moderator is not a policymaker.
Okay, that sounds good.
Although I'm a big
Alexa?
fan of public input.
Okay. Alexa?
Sure. So I'm going to sound like the broken record, but housing does seem to be something that we talk about so much, specifically as it intersects with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the work that we're doing as a town there. So I think that's an incredible opportunity. And my guess is there'll be a lot of discussion about it.
Very good. Cynthia, anything to
So
add?
I think the best use of the Peabody School through 2025 is as a middle school right now. And then I live very close to the property, so I don't know, I might have a conflict there. But I think there's many opportunities at the Peabody School. I think Starmet is a much more of a wild card, as the select board members have pointed out. And I think we have to do a lot of due diligence and have a big community discussion about what the possibilities are there and what the liabilities are there.
Great, thank you. And Stephanie?
Last but not least,
Yeah.
thank you, everybody. I think certainly housing is a good option for those properties, and I welcome that conversation, certainly as it gets elbow deep. Two things come to mind. Number one, what does affordable mean in this town? And, you know, I think of affordable more on the subsidy side in terms of government-sponsored subsidies. I'm not sure that's necessarily what everybody's talking about in terms of affordable. The second thing is we need to be able to build properties where people can get to grocery stores and schools and walk to the T. And so there's a whole host of other elements, kind of, you know, psychosocial elements that we need to take into account.
Very good, thank you. Next question.
This is for the moderator. What are the objections to electronic voting?
So an electronic vote is by its nature a secret ballot because when you push a little button on your clicker, the rest of the hall does not see how you have voted. There are some communities that embrace electronic voting for precisely that reason, but I think there is a large constituency in Concord that believes that we should own our points of view and their impacts on our neighbors, and we should be willing to stand up and hold our ballot up for or against something. So there are people who feel each way about that.
Great, thanks. Next question.
This is for the school committee, and why don't we have Alexa and then Cynthia go. We are very hopeful that in the coming year we can spend less effort and time managing COVID and can turn over to other priorities. Assuming that this is the case, what are the priorities you think the school committee can and should now make the time for? And I just want to also add, if you'd like to include anything about civics education, that would be great.
Okay, you said Cynthia first? Cynthia.
Oh, sorry. So I think outside of our duties and responsibilities regarding budget and policy, I think I mentioned earlier belonging, which would be part of our DEI work, belonging specifically with all of our communities, Boston, Concord, and Carlisle. I also think that we need to really dive into mental health issues. You asked about civic, right? So there's a new curriculum for civic education, I think middle school, and then maybe a curriculum for one of the high school grades. I don't know exactly. And I'm sure has been implemented and been worked on. And we'll probably get a presentation on it in the near future, I would think. But I think outside of our regular work, it's really belonging and looking at mental health.
Alexa?
Sure. I concur completely with my colleague, but in order to not be duplicative and boring. I think a third area that we really need to focus in on as a school committee is our work with special education. We've made a shift in these past 5 years to an inclusion approach to special education, which means trying to build in-house services and programs so that kids can be educated in their own communities. I fully support that. I think it's the way we should be approaching special education. So making sure that we expand those services as our kids continue to move through the schools, I think is something that's really important.
Thank you. Carmen has a addition.
Yes, but my ears perked up at the topic of civic education, and I'm part of the Mass Moderators Association, and the Mass Moderators Association has a curriculum for civic education, very mindful of the new requirements that the state has for this curriculum, and it's currently being revamped, and I just want to express my interest and how pleased I would be to participate with the schools on civic education.
Thank you. Wonderful. And Terry has an addition.
I'm also a very big fan of civics education, and I want to thank Susan Fry for bringing it up and leading the Concord Civics B team to victory, and I hope we can get back to that, because that is an extracurricular way also that we can get students involved, and the more involved they are as young people, the better educated and better decisions they'll make as our future citizens. So.
Excellent. Next question.
Expectations, this is a select board question. Expectations for the type and level of town services and improvements continue to rise, as do the costs of providing them. Efficiencies only go so far and can lead to high staff turnover. How do we manage this?
We'll start with Mary.
Good question. One of the things that I'm hoping to do is to, again, revitalize our business and our commercial spaces. As I mentioned earlier, the village centers that we have not only add town character, but they add local receipts to our revenue sources, and they pay property taxes. We also have some commercial districts in town that are zoned commercial, but really aren't producing the level of activity that we would hope for. We've got 2 new businesses in town that are, one is called Trashology, one is Plug Power. They're both clean energy companies in West Concord. They're doing good work. They're creating jobs, and they're adding revenue to our coffers.
Thank you. And Terry.
Well, yes, this is a huge challenge. Town services are increasing in cost. Citizens are demanding more. We need to figure out how to work smarter, not harder, and it's a huge challenge that I've been working with Carrie LaFleur on a lot. I don't know what the answer is going to be for this, but it's probably one of the biggest challenges that we're going to be facing. And I think, again, the civics education as a long-term solution will help future citizens to understand this balance that we have to have.
Thanks. Another question.
For the school committee, why only one METCO member for the committee?
And we'll start with Alexa for that.
Sure. I think a couple of reasons. One, because it's worked in other districts. We have started reaching out to a few other districts who are ahead of us in this work, and that has been sort of the model, I think, that has proven itself. And these districts are very similar to our own and near to us: Bedford, Weston, maybe Lincoln. So, rather than reinventing a wheel, I think it's, as we chart a new course and do something new, potentially looking to models that have historically worked has kind of been our MO.
Thank you. And Cynthia?
So I do think we need to have some kind of dialogue with the METCO families. There is a potential that having 2 that they could alternate or not have to feel like they have to attend every meeting, which can be burdensome in some cases. I believe Weston does have 2, but I can double check that. So I think as part of our deliberation regarding this policy, we should maybe think about how it could be more sustainable for the families to potentially have 2, or a little more flexible model if that person is unable to attend.
Okay, good question then. Next question.
All right, so is this one, this is from the audience, so is this for the select board or for everybody? I think that, yeah, this is everybody, sorry. Has your board or town assessed how rapidly Concord can cease use of fossil fuels? And if so, how rapidly will that occur?
We're going to start this one with Terry.
Okay, well, we do have a sustainability director. We are also working on several grants, as you probably know. We are going to take a position on Article 38, which Dean Banfield has brought up about electrifying vehicles and encouraging CMLP to move forward in a faster way. A lot of times we're a bully pulpit and we cannot directly do things, but we can help in those ways.
Carmen, do you have anything to add to that?
I will demur as a non-policymaker.
Sounds good. And Cynthia?
Our new sustainability director joined us relatively recently, especially since we're still kind of climbing out of COVID. So I think the school committee will look to collaborate more with her and the town and figure out ways that we could potentially reduce our fossil fuel dependencies.
Okay. Stephanie, do you have anything to add?
I know that when we replace our faulty systems now in the Housing Authority, certainly we look to make sure that those new appliances, for example, and also systems are energy efficient, and also we work both with the state and the federal guidelines to make sure that they're also moving toward the direction of fossil fuel extinction.
Okay. And Alexa?
Sure. Expanding the people with whom we collaborate on with this work, which would include Amanda Cohn and some of the local groups here in town. Our school committee does have a sustainability subcommittee that puts all of those voices in a room together once a month or so, and ensuring that we continue to be knowledgeable about opportunities out there to partner in the private sector or with different grant monies, I think will help ensure that that work is done at a more rapid clip.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question.
We have a question here for the school committee. As a policy matter, do you think the fees charged to use public school facilities should be calculated to optimize revenue generation, enhance community use, or cost recovery?
We'll start with Cynthia for that.
No, yes, yes. So no, I don't think we should be trying to monetize our schools. Our communities have bared the burden of paying for them over the years. Should we structure them so that they invite community use? Absolutely. And 3, we should recover our costs. That's the fiscally responsible thing to do.
Alexa, do you have a
Sure.
view on that?
Yeah, so I've followed, obviously, our building committee work with respect to the middle school really closely, and one of the things that came out of the discussions with the town was this resounding desire for the schools to be open for use to the public. So absolutely, I think our facilities fees should be designed, certainly not to, at the very least, not to prohibit use, and keep them accessible and equitable for everybody. And then as Cynthia mentioned, she nailed it. We have to be ensuring that we're fiscally prudent and so that we are able to maintain the spaces with those revenues.
Okay, thanks. Next question.
This is, I think, for the select board on regional transportation. Concord is a member of a regional group. What are your thoughts on Concord being more active with the Crosstown Connect?
And we'll start with Mary.
Yes, we should be more active. I know that we neglected to take advantage of some grants that were available to us simply because we didn't have the staff to do that. So yes, I think we should be doing as much as we can. I think in this year's budget, we've got a transportation planner that would be the focus of those efforts so that we're not burdening staff. But I think that transportation, both within town and connecting to our, within the region is something we really should prioritize.
Okay, and Terry?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I didn't get to quite raise my hand quick enough to follow through on one of the other ones about reducing fossil fuels, so this ties in. But I'm really proud that we've put a spotlight on transportation this year. We've reconstituted the Transportation Advisory Committee, and Nick Pappas and his group are doing a super job on looking at all these regional grants. One of the things is we didn't have enough staff. One is we don't have a vehicle for the Crosstown Connect. One is it stopped because of COVID. So all of that's going to be coming together now. They're also looking at complete streets. And very soon, the select board's going to be asked to take a grand look at infrastructure and transportation in general and look at a big grant or consultant for that.
Great, thank you. Next question.
This question's for everybody. As we know, not everyone agrees on all issues on a committee. What do you think is the best approach to reaching a consensus on contentious issues that your committee must address?
Let's start with Carmen on that, if that's relevant.
Sure, that's a process question, and I think that it's important for chairs to take a strong management role on committees and to make sure that each member of a committee has an opportunity to be heard and is respected and not interrupted. And then it's important for the committee to, if there is a vote that is divided and there is a report or a recommendation coming out of it, I think it's very important for the committee to speak as a single voice, saying the majority of the committee felt this way. However, there were these other considerations, but on balance, the committee felt we should go in this direction. In the end, we need to act together, and consensus is very important.
Thank you. Stephanie?
I think leadership is very important. I also think when I think about consensus, especially as it relates to the Housing Authority, we have a lot of homework before we get to a board meeting, and I think it's important in the spirit of consensus to make sure that opinions are based on all the homework you need to do. So that's my big thing, is to make sure that we've all read what we need to do, and even though sometimes it's a big charge.
Thanks. Alexa?
Sure. Piggybacking off what Stephanie said, I think the biggest challenge for committee work is to ensure that all the participants are operating from the same set of facts and the same aggregate of facts. I find sometimes when people don't have all the requisite data that they need to fully engage in the debate, the debate isn't as meaningful. So I think ensuring that everyone is going into the meeting with the same kind of foundational knowledge so that they can communicate effectively and reach consensus is really paramount.
Thank you. Terry?
Well, I'm really in favor of consensus building, but consensus is not the same as a unanimous board all the time. Sometimes there are shades of gray or even outright disagreement. And I do agree with Alexa and Stephanie that if we have a really good agenda packet and we have the same set of facts and everybody does their homework, and then everybody has a chance to speak, and then we may achieve consensus, but at least we had a good process, and I think that is the most important.
Okay. And Cynthia?
Yes, so I agree. I think it's a collaboration, respect, and humility. Very important that we're all working from the same set of facts, and that we can have a very clear and educated discussion. Sometimes it's difficult to achieve consensus, but we then have to, sometimes you're in the majority and sometimes you're in the minority. So I think we just have to be respectful of reaching some difficult decisions.
And Mary?
I agree with everything that's been said. I'd emphasize that it's the leadership, the chair of the committees need to make sure that every member feels heard. We're all working with the same set of facts. We take a vote. I'm comfortable with not having unanimous votes. That's fine with me, but once we have the vote, I think each member of the committee should support the decision of that committee. And the most important thing to me is, and then we leave the room having respect for each other and agreeing to disagree.
Great, thank you. Is there another question?
Yes, we have a question hot off the chat from someone not in the room. This is directed to the school committee and housing authority. What do you think the Comprehensive Sustainability and Energy Committee, or CSEC, and the Climate Action Advisory Board should be doing to work with the school committee and the housing committees?
And let's start with Cynthia for that.
Well, I think they work with the select board as well. I think we need to either have a liaison to one or both. Before COVID, I would attend one or both. But I think we definitely need to have more of a conversation with those groups because, like us, they're hardworking and have contributions about things that are potentials for us to look at as a school committee, our capital planning, and our budget.
Thank you. Alexa?
Did you say me?
I did.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of our most powerful positions are our liaison positions, as Cynthia said, and then also just ensuring that they're invited, if they're not already, to the sustainability subcommittee group, which again sort of puts all the relevant players in the room to share and collaborate and sort of crosstalk about all the different work that is happening in town and how it might intersect with the schools. That, to me, is a powerful room to be in.
And Stephanie?
Yeah, I second what Cynthia and Alexa said. I know what works best for us is to get focused time with these other groups to make sure we understand where our goals and our guiding principles intersect. And to the extent we can make it a priority to do that and to really set out, our own collaborative goals that also have their best interest at heart as well. We just need to, I think we need to make it a priority.
Okay, thank you. Another question?
Yes. Of course. We've all had a tough time the past 2 years dealing with COVID. So do you think there are any positive lessons that we've learned that you can apply in your role going forward?
Let's start, you started last time first, Carmen, so let's start with Mary.
Yeah, well, this might sound trite, but it helps you really put things in perspective. And sometimes I wind myself around the axle on things that really don't really matter that much in the long run. So one of the challenges I have going forward is not getting too emotionally involved in things and realizing that there's a longer view and we're all neighbors and we all want what's best for the town. So I think there was a coming together that we felt through COVID, and I'd like to retain some of that and get rid of the sickness part.
Nice. And next, Cynthia?
So I think the one thing for me that became starkly clear was that in-person learning, how you sort of took that for granted, and that learning on screens is terrible. So, I think for me, I sort of shifted from in-person learning, perhaps more experiential learning, and definitely trying to get our kids off screens, especially in school.
Carmen?
So remote participation has, it's been a plus and a minus. It's not the same to participate in a meeting remotely as it is to participate it in person. On the other hand, there's been a broader participation in, for example, the hearings leading up to town meeting, when people can plug in remotely and watch on Zoom. That's something I hope we keep. It won't be up to us. There are some state legislative decisions that will have to be made, and it's not an option that we have for town meeting. Town meeting is still required to be, for open town meeting anyway, is still required to be in person. But I'd say there have been some tremendous gains in remote participation that's increased participation. That's been a good thing that we want to keep.
Stephanie?
Personally, I've become much more technology savvy than I was. So that's at least personally a plus for me. In terms of what we've experienced on the Housing Authority side, I think we've seen some increased participation, not a whole lot. So net, to be honest, I don't see a lot of pluses that are, are new to what has been mentioned already, frankly.
Okay. And Terry?
Well, I agree that the remote participation has actually improved civic engagement to a great deal. We've had much more participation, and many of our committees really like it, and I've heard that in other towns as well. I'm a member of the MMA Fiscal Policy Committee, and everyone wants to urge the legislators and the governor to please extend this. Right now, I'm not sure I can read how many people we have on Zoom, but it's just been such a benefit to be able to do these hybrid meetings. And at the same time, it's really great to be together in person. And as I said before, it shows us what's important in life. Let's not take our community for granted. Let's continue our active civic engagement.
I'm going to ask Alexa, and then I'll get to you, Carmen. Alexa?
Oh, sure. I almost want to say there are no positives. However, as we all have talked about our great desire for civic engagement, I think the one thing COVID did, we can talk about participation and how technology provides access to that, but for me, it was the first time where I saw everyone collectively stood up and started paying attention at the same time. And of course, they were paying attention to COVID, but it put them in the room at the select board meeting or the school committee meeting. And so they heard everything else too. And that, was not about COVID. And so to me, I'm hoping that makes some long-term gains, 'cause something else might have piqued someone's interest.
Carmen, did you have something to add?
I did. I just wanted to add that remote participation has been not only a benefit to the public, but to committee members as well. And it's difficult for people with full-time jobs and demanding home schedules to do the evening meetings that are required for our boards and committees. And I can really see that we are able to have more diversity on the Finance Committee, for example, when the committee members are able to participate remotely, and it would be nice to keep that.
Good. Next question.
This question comes from the floor, and it's parking with 3 question marks. So
And
could
who is
each
that
person,
for?
could
Select board,
everybody
looks like.
take this very broad question, but specifically answer it to your area? for example, the schools, that there are many questions about the parking. So, all right.
Okay, it's, I think, primarily a select board question.
It says
looks like
select
the-
board, but we wanted to
You,
broaden
okay,
it. Because,
excellent. I'm
it-
gonna
yeah.
go through and ask everyone then.
Yeah,
We're gonna
thank you.
start with Alexa.
Thank you.
Sure. Parking has been a topic at the school committee level for too long. It's challenging. It's like it's everything else. We have a finite resource and too much demand. And I know that I think it will continue to be an issue. And I'm not going to fake it. I don't have a solution for that right now. I wish I did. I wish I could say I'm some creative genius here on the top of my head. But if you want me to be very honest, I'm just about this specifically. I'm kind of not yet.
Okay, Terry?
I'm a very big proponent of getting rid of the meters. I've seen, when I was town administrator in Braintree, they took out all the meters in neighboring Quincy, and business went up 20%. The businesses loved it, the customers loved it. I really don't see why we need meters. They don't benefit any citizens in town or any businesses. I know people say that employees might hog up all the spaces, but look at our Sundays. We're not having a parking problem Sundays. We didn't have it before COVID. December, it's Saturdays, the busiest time of year, and we still don't have a parking problem. So I don't understand why we need the meters, and I'd like to get rid of them as soon as possible.
Excellent. Stephanie, do you have a parking thought?
I'm actually going to just twist it a little bit, if I may. And let me just say the reason I'm going to twist it is just because I haven't heard that as a big problem or an issue from the Housing Authority perspective. That may not be true, but I haven't heard it. Our folks need transportation, not parking. They need transportation to see their doctors, go to different services. And that's sort of how I think about parking, is they need help getting places.
And Mary?
Yeah, I agree with transportation is one of the best ways that we can alleviate the need for parking. A crosstown bus would do a lot to help us. Putting more services and residences in town centers would do a lot to relieve parking, but the cars aren't going away. They might become electric, but they're not going away. So we're still gonna need some parking, but I believe that transportation services is the best way to alleviate that.
Carmen, do you have something to add?
We deal with parking for town meeting. If we want more participants, they have to get there. And, currently we have limited parking at the high school. We use the Alcott parking lot as overflow for a special town meeting. We worked out an arrangement with the courthouse to use their parking lot, and I think we plan to continue to try to do that. And boy, I can see how a crosstown bus could be very helpful to us in terms of getting people to and from town meeting.
Right. And Cynthia?
So, as Alexa said, we certainly have a parking problem at the high school, but since we're not in charge of operations, we hear about it, but we don't really have a way to fix it. I would like to maybe, in the years to come, explore what the impact of crosstown bus has or had on communities in the schools that have them, like Lexington, for example. I know that it has alleviated some of their transportation issues, and it's not going to work for everybody for a variety of reasons, but it might work for a few people.
Excellent. Good question. Surprisingly good question. And next
I
question.
have a question for town moderator. Thank you, Carmen, for your outreach to PTGs that you mentioned earlier. The question comes, do you have any ideas, or have you heard good ideas for increasing town meeting participation among parents with small children?
With small children who are perhaps not in school yet. Exactly. Yes. We have the wonderful Erin Stevens, who is our public information officer, and I've worked with Erin to make sure that we are on social media and that we have a lot of information and notices going out there to people who are getting their news on social media or following the town's Twitter account. There's not an easy way to reach those families. So I think social media and banners in the street, and if we ever have our substitute for the newspaper up and running, that'll be another way. Thank you.
Another question?
Well, so we're getting low on questions. And
Okay.
Please feel free to add more,
Continue to add
ask
them.
more, put them in the chat. We do have one here. If the town suddenly came into $5 million of a windfall, what do you think are the greatest needs or opportunities to which it could be applied?
Excellent.
Sounds like our
question. Okay. Terry really wants to start, so I'm going to honor
Okay.
that request.
So the town did come into $5.6 million, so thank you. We tried to hold a focused meeting or a public forum, because like some of the other questions, the select board's only 5 people, we shouldn't be making that decision. So it was really great to have a lot of public participation. We had a lot of great ideas on infrastructure, such as all of these transportation things we're talking about, complete streets, getting a vehicle for Crosstown Connect, et cetera. Putting some of the money maybe into the middle school building project, and all of these great ideas came out of it. So that's what I think we should do. We should take this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and put it into some big-time, important projects.
Mary, do you want to comment?
Yeah, the select board did do a great job as far as getting a lot of community input, but I think it's up to the select board and the town manager to now decide exactly how those funds are going to be allocated. We get input, but it's our job as the select board to decide. And I think the first step would be to outlining the criteria we would use to allocate that money. And my thought would be that the criteria should be what has the longest range, longer term value to the town, and what benefits the greater number of people. So that would be my beginning of that conversation, which is what is the criteria that we're going to use to allocate this money? Now that we've gotten the feedback, how are we going to spend it? And what is the criteria that we're going to use? And again, it would be how do we benefit the most people, and how does it have long-term benefits?
Excellent. Cynthia?
We did not get a windfall of $5 million. We did get another windfall of ESSER money, and I don't have that number at the top of my head, unfortunately. Rather, $1 million plus?
$1 million bucks, a
Yeah,
little over $1 million.
of ESSER funds for the Concord Public Schools. And it's been the responsibility of the school committee to work with the superintendent to decide how those funds are used, and I believe they need to be used by the fall of '24. The town, I think, has a bigger challenge, and I agree that you should try to pick some big projects instead of sprinkling around. And of course, I'm sure the citizens would appreciate further flattening out the debt payments or the tax payments for the middle school project.
And Alexa, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I think we opened with what the 3 biggest challenges were facing our, different bodies. So I'll go back to really 2 of those 3, because I think they can be directly helped with dollars. And they are sort of closing the gap that was exacerbated by COVID with learning, and ensuring kids that remain not only at grade level, but sort of excel here in Concord. And then secondly, mental health. I think if we had some money, the idea would be to go through and ensure that every single program that we need to ensure the success of our students academically and with respect to their well-being, I would want to make sure that we're doing everything we can in those 2 areas.
Great, thanks.
Just a quick response. I think it's tempting to fund operations with this money, and we just have to be careful, because then we'll fall off that cliff if we fund a 2 or 3 year position, and then the funds are no longer there. in '24, and then we're left with a full-time employee that we value, but now we have to put them back in our regular budget.
Okay, and Stephanie, do you have?
I agree that this needs to be a town-wide decision. Certainly, we could think of how to use those dollars from a housing authority perspective. I also think it's funny, my perspective was that $5 million wasn't a lot of money. Especially, and it is a lot, you know, it's a nice windfall. It's just for me, when I think about these infrastructure projects that we have to pay for, you know, from roads to sewer to, you know, roofs on houses. I mean, there's just so many things and they're extraordinarily expensive. So I'm not sure how I think you need to size it. And as Mary said, make sure you have the criteria to say, how can we use these dollars to benefit the most folks and have the most long-lasting impact?
Excellent, thanks. And Carmen?
Well, once again, I'm not a policy maker, but I will say that from my perspective as moderator, I'd love to see us put in some permanent audio-visual equipment in the gymnasium in the high school so that we didn't have to rent it every year, and we had a nice big screen that came down from the ceiling, and I'm betting that town meeting would not be the only use for that giant screen up there, so that'd be my pet project.
Jumbotron, okay. Jumbotron, we can put it on the list.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions? No. Any other questions in the chat or the room? Oh, we have one more card coming in.
I'm just reading them.
Fair.
For the select board candidates, the town has spent more than $1 million
Oh, boy.
in litigation against citizens of Estabrook Woods. Will you vote to continue the lawsuits, is how the question is phrased.
Okay. Mary looks like she wants to start.
I'll go first. The question is, what would I vote going forward? I'm sorry. Can you just?
What your view
That's
is
the
on
gist.
whether or not to
Okay.
continue the lawsuits.
I think it can go one of two ways right now. The judge is either going to vote in the town's favor or not. If the judge votes in the town's favor, then I would be willing to spend money to defend that if the defendants appeal. If, however, the town loses, my position would be that we should walk away from this and try to heal.
Terry?
I agree, and I think we're going to have to do some big healing no matter what happens. There's a lot of damage that's been done, and it's really regrettable. As you know, we've inherited this situation from previous years. None of the current members were on the board when the lawsuit started. So we're all looking forward to the heal, and it's going to be some hard work to do some healing that we need to do.
Very good. Anybody else want to comment on that or no? Okay. Other questions? So I think this concludes the candidates forum. Thank you to our candidates for your time and your thoughtful responses.
Are we going to have closing
You are,
statements?
yes, thank you for that
You're first,
reminder.
then.
I'm ready.
That's it. You have to go first.
I'm ready.
And of course, that was my next thing I was going to say. We started with Carmen on the way in, so we're going to start with Stephanie on the way out. You have, I guess, 30 seconds?
30 seconds. So thank you very much again for inviting me. I have a feeling I probably learned more than anybody in this room today. Please vote. I think that's, to kind of put an underline under why we're here. I look forward to my next 5 years on the Housing Authority. We've got so much to do. That's the other part of this too, is I think we're just very, very busy. I think this town is full of riches, and I have to tell you, I think what the Housing Authority does and the people we serve is absolutely part of those riches. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Stephanie. And Cynthia?
I've thoroughly enjoyed this afternoon. So many good questions and comments. One thing that I learned a couple of things, or I thought made me think about a couple of things, is that maybe we do need to do a little bit of a deep dive on civics as a school committee. I know work is going on. I'd just love to know what is going on and see a little bit of that. The other thing is, Alexa mentioned a sustainability subcommittee, the school committee. Currently, it's a superintendent sustainability committee, but made me think that maybe we should explore that to strengthen our relationship with the town's sustainability effort. So that's just one thought. And again, thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity.
Alexa?
Thank you, everyone on the league. This has been a surprisingly enjoyable way to spend a Sunday afternoon. It wasn't too tough. So I appreciate that so much. You know, I moved back to Concord, I'm just realizing as I was doing the quick math in my head, 20 years ago. I grew up here, and if you had ever told me that I would ever return willingly, I never would have believed it. And 20 years later, here I am. And I just want to say, this position for me feels like a real gift, and I appreciate it. I authentically enjoy it, and it is something I take, you know, pretty seriously, all things considered, and I'm just so grateful for the opportunity. So please vote on the 8th or 12th for all of us.
And Mary?
When I decided to run for the select board, and I told my friends and my colleagues, many of them said, "Great, you'll do a good job," and some of them looked at me like, "Are you crazy?" Because it's a lot of work. I'm going to make decisions that are going to disappoint some people, and there's incivility afoot. So I had to really take an honest and deeper look at, why am I doing this? And I'm doing this because I love having a voice in these types of discussions. People can serve in a lot of different ways. This plays to my strengths. I'm so glad to be here. I'm ready, I'm willing, I'm able to serve, and I hope I've earned your support.
Thank you. And Terry?
Well, thank you, Mary. We're really looking forward to having you on the board, and I'm so glad you decided to run. And everybody, please do vote on April 12th. That is very important to all of us up here. But just to say some of the accomplishments that we have done in the last few years, bringing more focus to the select board, increasing collaboration and transparency, such as with the ARPA discussion, or with our brainstorming session on revenue offsets for the middle school building project, the Envision Concord report progress to date. The capital planning process is now in place, putting a spotlight on transportation issues and a spotlight on fiscal sustainability, and restarting the annual training workshop for all boards and committees. So those are some of our accomplishments, and we hope to continue. We plan to continue doing more. Thank you for the chance to have me and everyone else serve the town of Concord.
Thank you. Carmen?
I'd like to thank the League for today's forum. I'd like to thank Concord voters for supporting me so many times at the polls. I'd like to ask everybody to come and vote for me and all these other wonderful people on April 12th, and please come to town meeting on May 1st. And if you have any ideas about how to increase participation in town meeting, you can find me at moderator@concordma.gov. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Now is another time we can. I get to make our plug now, which is that this forum has been hosted by the League of Women Voters, which is a national nonpartisan organization with over 100 years of service encouraging informed, active participation in government. If you're not already a member and you appreciate our work or are interested in joining us, please consider donating or becoming a member today. There's ways to do that on the back table. And many thanks to all of you who made this happen as well as the candidates. So Carlin Reed for organizing the forum, Linda Zifrin, Stefan Bader, and Susan Fry for collating our questions. Minuteman Media, who has been here streaming and taping the event, or not taping the event, but streaming and doing the entire setup in the room. And to our logistics team on Zoom, we'll do both of those together. The logistics team on Zoom and Minuteman Media for making this available in the future and managing everyone who's virtual today. And all the league members who donated or gave us questions ahead of time. Thank you. And of course, the voters, everyone for showing up. And I don't need to say it since everybody said it already, but I am going to do it anyway, which is vote on April 12th. And remember to check your polling place if you haven't done it since the changes in precincts. Did you have something to add to that, Cynthia?
What's the deadline for absentee? Do you have that at your fingertips? We'll put it in the Monday Member News.
We'll put it in Monday Member News. And we have lovely refreshments here.
Yes.
So it's your chance to
Zoom
mingle.
people can jump in.
Sorry, people, but this is why you show up in person. It's really worth it. And Carlin has something to add. Oh, and Carlin has the answer.
And thank you, Nancy Concord. Yeah, thank you, Nancy.
Nancy's the real reason why we're here, and this marvelous job. Okay, absentee ballots can be handed in up until 8 p.m. on the date of the election. So April 12, 8 p.m. to hand it in to the townhouse.
Is there a deadline for picking one up? No.
For picking one up, I don't believe there is. What's the important part is getting it delivered on time so that the poll workers have a chance to actually read it and count it with everything else. Okay.
I don't want to give misinformation, but I think if you're going to request that by mail, it has to be a week ahead of time.
That's different, yep.
Right.
If you're going to request the ballot by mail to get it out to you.
It's complicated.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
All right.
Nancy.